everyone. Welcome to our reading this afternoon. My name is Eileen Casanero. I'm the publisher of Paloma Press, and I'm very honored to feature two poets whose works bravely tackle not just some of the personal and collective costs of war, but the healing that is so sorely needed by our wounded warriors and their families. Sharing their poetry and projects with us are Dr. Frederick Foote, author of Medic Against Bomb, and Jeanne-Marie Osterman, author of Shellback, to be released by Paloma Press on February 1st. About Shellback, the poet and Navy junior Gardner McFall writes, the beautifully sequenced poems in Jeanne-Marie Osterman's Shellback yield a searing portrait of the poet's father as a Depression-era boy and a Navy World War II veteran, given to emotional coldness and barely repressed anger. Their poignancy resides in the poet's filial devotion, her wish to understand him and care for him in his old age. With often haunting imagery and carefully clipped lines, she memorably portrays a man, his era, and a daughter's unstinting love. Jeanne-Marie, who is our first reader, is also the author of There's a Hum from Finishing Line Press, and her poems have appeared in Borderlands, Cathexis Northwest, 45th Parallel Magazine, the Madison Review, and elsewhere. A finalist for the 2018 Joy Harjo Poetry Award and 2017 Levi's Prize in Poetry, she is poetry editor for Kajibi. Welcome, Jeanne-Marie Osterman.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Can you hear me? You never know with these things. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks everyone who is here to listen. And I look forward to later hearing Dr. Foote's poems as well, and about the great work he's doing for veterans. So stay tuned, everybody. My book, Shellback, is about my relationship with my dad, the son of a Swedish immigrant and native of Everett, Washington, who survived a kamikaze attack during World War II. It wasn't until my dad was in his 90s, not so many years ago, that he told me about some of the horrors he'd experienced in combat. He'd been holding it in. And I think, like many war vets, he just wanted to come home, get back to normal, and bury the memories, which I can't imagine didn't haunt him all his life in some way. My dad served aboard the USS Nevada. The ship has a fascinating history, and it's easily found on the internet. But briefly, it was built at the beginning of the last century in Massachusetts. It served in World War I. It was moored at Pearl Harbor the day the Japanese attacked, and it was terribly damaged, but it was repaired and then sent for the Normandy invasion on D-Day. Then it did some maneuvers in the Mediterranean, went back to Pearl Harbor, where it was sent to the Battle of Iwo Jima, and then to the Battle of Okinawa, which is where it was attacked by the kamikaze, and that's where and when my father was on the ship. It earned the name finally of the ship that wouldn't sink, because after the war, they did nuclear bomb tests on the Nevada, and it still didn't sink. They towed it back to Hawaii, where it sat full of radioactivity and damaged beyond repair. And so once again, they towed it out to sea, and they just torpedoed the heck of it until it finally sank. And I read that just recently some divers were finding parts of it 65 nautical miles off the coast of Hawaii. So since I'm talking about the Nevada, that brings me to my first poem. And this is my dad talking to me when he's in assisted living. He starts telling me what life was like on the ship. And this is called On the USS Nevada. We each had an interesting job, my father tells me, over a bowl of chili. The powder man lifted the powder case onto the gun's rammer tray. The projectile man pulled the rammer lever that loaded the chamber. The check sight made sure we were aimed at the target. The hot case man caught the shells that flew from the guns. Those shells were the size of a little league bat, he says, making fists as if holding a slugger. He threw them into a tub of seawater, and when the guns weren't blasting, you could hear them sizzle. He sets down his spoon and wipes his mouth. My job, he says, didn't have a name. I went through the stuff of the guys who got killed. I separated it into two piles. One of any items like letters or pictures that might be offensive to wives or parents. The rest I sent back home. The next poem also takes place on the USS Nevada, which is, and this is I'm going to tell you about the day the kamikaze hit. And my dad told me that when these big ships were assembling for the Battle of Okinawa, this was in March 1945, they had what they called a picket line in front of the ships that was protecting the big warships. And he said that if you were assigned to the picket line, it was a terrible thing because you had a good chance of being killed or injured. And this is called End Like a Sponge. Kuramareto, Okinawa, Japan, March 27, 1945. A Japanese pilot breaks through the picket and crashes on my father's ship. The pilot pops out of the cockpit and bounces down the deck. He's just a torso. The end like a sponge filled with blood. It's the sea. Something in the sea is calling us back to be the watery creatures we once were, big-mouthed and bag-like, happy to engulf our food all day. Then came suicide pilots and battleships, guns as long as the dug firs that line I-5. 11 killed, plus the pilot, missed my father by 20 feet. The sea, we all come from the sea. The sailors wrapped the torso in canvas. With no limbs or skull, he's nearly square, a bag of cement. They say a prayer and lower him into the sea. My father, remembering trees, doesn't know why he's alive. And my dad made it a point to tell me that the Japanese pilot was given the same proper burial at sea as the American sailors. The chaplain said a prayer over him as well. This next poem is what my dad called the swimmers. These were the unsung kamikazes. They didn't fly in planes and crash on ship decks and go up in flames. They swam underwater to US ships, carrying a bomb on a bamboo pole, and they chained themselves to the hull and detonated their bomb there, dying in glory and hoping to do some damage to the US ship. The Japanese called them fukuryu, and that's the name of this poem. And here I am addressing the Japanese swimmer. You turn yourself into a fish, your teeth a bomb on a bamboo pole. Your sacred scarf flutters behind you, an angelfish fin. No ifs, your death guaranteed when you detonate. Mine chain, a sailor shouts, hearing your rattle against the hull. You're caught in a net and hoisted aboard, your dream of dying ending in life. The sailors, too shocked by your small size to celebrate. You are all teenagers. And again, my dad said they brought these guys up in nets and put them in the brig, but he said they treated them humanely. Wanted to add that. Now we've been working up to the actual Battle of Okinawa, which it was the second largest battle of World War II after the invasion of Normandy. It began on April the 1st and Easter Sunday, 1945. And in this battle, 150,000 people were killed, 50,000 Americans and 100,000 Japanese. This poem is called Think of It. Think of an island, a rocky coast, some caves, winding roads, thatched roofed huts, umbrella trees, a line of ships, guns pointing like fingers, spotter planes buzzing like flies over a supper plate, ships giving birth, landing tanks tumbling from the monster hole, scuttling to shore. The rocky coast, pounded to powder, ponds dyed red with blood. The night sky, bursting, astonishing Depression-era boys who've never seen fireworks. And next is my title poem, Shellback, for anyone that doesn't know. Shellback is the name given to a sailor when they cross the equator for the first time, and for which there's a traditional initiation ceremony. And what today I understand is a fun, morale-boosting celebration. As late as World War II, it take the form of a brutal hazing, and this unfortunately was my father's experience. This poem is called Shellback. I wouldn't expect men on their way home from war to be bird watching off the starboard or stringing dewdrops. Nor would I think they'd force a fellow sailor to swallow a box of laxatives, make him crawl through a week's worth of ship's garbage, through teeming larvae in equatorial heat, or make a man who'd faced kamikazes kneel and kiss their fungal toes, and as he does, shock him with an electric rod until he passes out. I wouldn't expect the captain to look on and laugh from the conning tower. This was the Shellback ceremony, Navy initiation for sailors crossing the equator for the first time. This is one Shellback's daughter, trying to find that wiser self within who can forgive these men. For they've come from Okinawa, where they watched a buddy's skull blow out of his head, his teeth still gripping his last cigarette. And now we are post-war for just a moment. What I referred to earlier, the combat veterans that hold it all inside and never talk about it. I think maybe their children can sense something, because I think the bad memories can come out in subtle ways, even if they're holding it in as tight as they can. I'm trying to deal with that in this poem. It's called Patterns. If you were 27 and had been on a ship in the South Pacific, if you had been the target of planes whose pilots were determined to die just to kill you, you might, when you got home, mow the lawn with your jaw clenched, making patterns in the green. You might spend hours trying to teach a deaf dog to talk, raise your children tight-lipped, unable to speak for the din of siren calls to general quarters, crash of planes on a metal deck. You might think that holding it in kept it from us, but we could feel it. We could see from the patterns in the green, something was in there. And so it was our war too. And my last poem is a happier poem. If you haven't guessed, I worshiped my father. And as I may have mentioned earlier, I grew up in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, lots of trees and rivers. And I was always trying to get my dad to do something with me, I was a tomboy and I wanted to go hang out with him in the woods and do stuff. And in this poem, I am addressing my father. Oh, and for those who don't know, an Oli is an Olympia beer of choice in the Pacific Northwest. This is called On the Stillaguamish River. What was it made me dream so big that I could get you to take me down the Stilly? Old rubber raft hanging limp in the basement, deflated. You, not much for water songs. Why do you say yes? Hunt down pump and patches, your dry red hands making the bark river-worthy on the muddy shore. Not my plan to discover anything out there. I just wanted to take up your time, see how you, once a sailor, would row, save me from drowning if I fell in. Yet once underway, I didn't look at you. Sorry, once underway, I didn't look at you or the water. I was fixated on the backs of shacks we passed, their sagging porches and rickety stairs, trying to imagine what dramas played out inside. We passed an old juke joint, empties overflowing a rusty barrel. Barkeep tossed a tub of ice out the back. You waved him $1. Sell me an Oli? Ballast, I stayed low while the can was passed. I'd have gladly drowned that day. Thank you.
So moving. Thank you so much, Jeanne-Marie. Our next reader is none other than retired Navy doctor, neurologist, and poet, Dr. Frederick O. Foote, the author of Medic Against Bomb, A Doctor's Poetry of War, winner of the Grayson Books Poetry Prize. Dr. Foote leads the Warrior Poetry Project, which engages veterans with brain injury and PTSD in arts activities and sports activities to promote healing. He is poetry editor of O Dark 30, the literary journal of the Veterans Writing Project. He is also project manager for The Green Road, a $3 million half-mile-long healing garden for wounded warriors at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the nation's largest hospital-based healing garden. Welcome, Dr. Frederick Foote.
Okay. Hello, everyone. As Aileen said, I'm Fred Foote. I'm a retired Navy doctor. And I just want to say how much I admired Jeanne-Marie's poems. They're beautiful and moving. I'm glad I bought her bookshelf back. And it's also amazing to me how she got all the technical and historical details right. So you did your dad proud. Aileen, could you let me know if I'm sort of audible here?
Yes, you sound good.
I am? I sound okay. All right, so we sort of fixed it. Okay, so as I say, I'm a retired Navy physician, and I'm going to tell you some poems about the wounded of our Iraq-Afghan wars. And then I'm going to tell you a little about how we're healing wounded soldiers with art and nature at our Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. It goes without saying I do not speak for the U.S. government. In fact, they would say the opposite. This is my book, Medic Against Bomb. It's about our wounded warriors and military healers. It's available on Amazon. Many of the poems I'm going to say for you came from the cruise of the hospital ship Comfort to the Iraq invasion in 2003, when we had both American and Iraqi patients. And the photographs are also from that cruise, or some are from later, treating patients at Walter Reed. So my first poem is about a wounded American soldier, and it's called The Man in the Wound. Quiet the ward, quiet the dressing cart now. Quiet the morphine drip, blast easer of pain. Turning his head as I pass, he says, hi da. Asks if I'm working too hard. I look beat, overstrained. His wound came at Nasiriyah, and I was not there to shield him from bullets and flame, being safe in the rear, yet his thought is always of me, the nurse or the friend, sometimes even the enemy soldier he glimpses or hears. With arms laid waste, he finds no reason to hate. His comrades now are all who grieved and withstood, just as the wound proclaims, the hell all have made. The man in the wound is raised, shown peaceful and good. My next poem is about two American soldiers who went to the war together. It's called Bonded. Loader and gunner, brothers from boot camp days. They came in one platoon to the shock of the war. Daily they clung together for strength and grace. Each promised to bring the other home once more. Now both return, two versions of amputee. It's back to Lejeune, driving the truck with one hand, learning the truth about girls. Will they tend and cleave, or turn with regret to find an unblemished man? The road treks hard through rehab, shrinks the VA. Edge the night set dream of friends who couldn't be saved. The hail will dance and run. Few will know what to say. And pity's worse than contempt to the souls of the brave. As I mentioned, on the hospital ship, we had Iraqi patients also, and some of them were enemy prisoners. And they were on a special ward, and that was a crazy place. All kinds of wild stuff happened there. And this is about a work of healing done by a Navy nurse named Cassandra Spears. It's called Dark Center. Twice a day, it welled up on the Iraqi men's ward, the cries of alarm, meaning pain, would rise and waver again in a ululating howl, dead wolves calling for the moon. From the depths of the Baptist beast, the teens, the old men in cabs, riddled with bullets as Baghdad seethed. Today, it began again, and we waited in dread, knowing no one could ever hope to feel this on our spaceship of abduction rocketing through the void, till you, Cassandra Spears, with your Grady-born grace, deep and wide as Atlanta with its fear-drenched poor, yelled, "Shut up, I alarm," and as the hubbubbies, "Y'all make me have alarm." And they laughed through their tears. Modern war being what it is, about 50% of our patients were women and children and old men. And these were shattered people, homes blown up, clothes blown off, including for the women their sacred Muslim headscarf. Children killed, thrown in a helicopter and flown to what seemed like a prison, and nobody on our ship could speak Arabic, right? We only had one translator. We were only expecting American patients. So these Muslim patients, they kind of fell apart. They didn't follow diet. They did not show modesty. They didn't pray. This poem is about a work of healing done by a lady surgeon named Pat McKay. And it's called "You Gave the Iraqis Their Scarves." When limbs are lost, who stops to think of clothing thrown away? Who knows the shame of sheltered girls on sudden public display? And so within the non-combatants' ward, they neither prayed nor shrank from pork, but showed their skin with vacant-eyed sang-froid, knowing that since the world had burned alive, it didn't matter. You came out of the OR night after night and wrote your orders just as the men would do, but then instead of clumping off to bed or getting drunk on bootleg DVDs, you'd find a place no one could observe, bring out an ancient Singer sewing machine and squares of silk left over from a quilt the nurses made to celebrate our work. And there each night, like the breath of a word, you'd sew, quietly sew, as the ocean weaves a reef together after a storm, binding polyps with tiny fish, bringing grass back together with stone, with overflowing largesse of patience. The day you brought the scarves down, they pressed your hands, and those not maimed tied scarves around the heads of friends who couldn't move. Silk to die for. New to those dust-colored homes, only the F-18s had deemed worth bombing those who thought they could no longer weep. Wept to feel the touch of simple cloth, and they were once again sacred women. I'll just pause and add another poem here. I told you that we didn't have any translators on the ship with these Iraq patients. How do we talk to them? Well, we taught ourselves Pidgin Arabic. We got Arabic for Dummies and, studied. And this poem is about that experience. It's called Nursing the Iraqis. And in this poem, DOD means Department of Defense. Here's how I learned their tongue. Sadiq, Sahir, Amalia. Small operation. He goggled at me. La alam, la alam. No pain. Took the edge off the fear. We had no translators. Infallible DOD. That came from a Berlitz book, a nightly task after the wounds, the unrelenting burns that had their run. We must have seemed half mad. Doctors chanting on rounds, nurses warbling, corpsmen speaking tongues. Never since Babel such overflow of sounds. One phrase, salam alaikum, stilled every alarm. It showed in the face, the terror yanked like a mask. No one who knew God's name could mean them harm. My last poem is about a soldier with PTSD, and it's called Rock Creek PTSD because the old Walter Reed Hospital, predecessor of the current one, was in Rock Creek Park in Washington, and the warriors would go there for respite, but sometimes they had painful visions, so Rock Creek PTSD. Rock Creek tumbles as daylight ends, its water pours over straits and bends, flinging its way through spouts and flumes as human fortune collides with doom. Tumult issued in roaring sounds clears the mist as the rush tilts down to freezing deeps and pernicious bogs, obliquely featured with fallen logs. You soothed my suffering mind before, and how I wish you were not transformed, turned so fatal in each detail, your clean, bright energy leached and paled. I shun like fever's ferocity, such haunted boulders and frightened trees. all over the creek an expanse of foam, quick jets of blood flying chips like bone. You chimed your wish in Fallujah's ear, and twilight echoed as it does here. How many heroes in those harsh days fell into your flood and were borne away? Rock Creek, measure of all my fears, I curse your crying with my own tears. Fury sweeping across this ground, return my brothers whom you have drowned. Having told you something about the wounds of war, I'll now tell a little about how we're treating those with art and nature at Walter Reed. And Aileen, would you let me know if I'm coming through okay? Could you?
Yes, you sound good.
Good. Excellent. Okay. In this war, these two wars, our problem is not bullet wounds, it's brain injury from bomb blasts and PTSD. And our old medicine of drugs and surgery didn't work. So we had to kind of create or revive new kind of medicine called holistic care that some of you will be familiar with. And, most pills and surgery, it treats one organ of the body at a time. That's called organ system care. But holistic care is any treatment that treats the entire body all at once. So that's holistic care. And we built a new hospital with many billions of your kind dollars as a model for combining holistic care with conventional care, and it has proved effective with the brain injury PTSD. This is our beautiful Walter Reed. Holistic care includes healing buildings. Your whole body's in a healing building, so it's holistic. Family engagement, integration of care, one care plan, not 50. That's a healing building. It's our brain injury center at Walter Reed. And you all will know a lot about nutrition and mind-body medicine, acupuncture. That's all holistic care. And then what I'm telling today is healing through art and nature. The Walter Reed Arts Program is one of the biggest in the nation. We have 3 paid coordinators and maybe a dozen paid artists and many volunteers. And the patients and their families learn to make art. You can choose any kind of art. It can be music, can be dance, can be writing. We have a lot of partners, and the bottom line on this is it's very, very effective for brain injury and PTSD. They always say the arts program is the most helpful part of their therapy. These are the masks from the Brain Injury Center that have been displayed widely. Here's just a simple little making a mandala. It's good to hear music, it's good to watch drama, but the real healing comes when you make it yourself. So essentially what our program does is we give lessons in music and art and poetry, and the warriors learn to do that, and that's what does the healing. It's one of our little studios. It's a music studio. You may, out in your part of the country, there's the actor Charlie Sheen, and he's always in the tabloids, but he also gave us $1 million to make this studio. So if anybody disrespects Charlie Sheen, you tell him he's a good guy. I want to mention the Veterans Writing Project. Aileen mentioned it. My buddy Ron Kapp started that, and it does seminars at various locations, helping veterans to learn to write. And then also we have the ODark 30 literary magazine. Anyone who is a family member or a soldier, a military person, can send poems, stories, or whatever to ODark 30. You can either Google Veterans Writing Project or ODark 30. And since I'm the poetry editor, I promise you we will pay attention. There's just some of the recent issues of ODark 30. Now, I want to tell you a little about our big project, the Green Road, where we heal through nature, okay? The Green Road is a half-mile long road. It's actually a road for people in wheelchairs, not for cars. And on this map, this is our campus at Walter Reed. There's a lot of green space there. You could heal through nature with that. There's even that blue line, a natural stream that goes through the woods, green woods, through the campus. So the Green Road connects the 3 dots. It's a pathway along that stream connecting 2 wounded warrior housing areas. And then the Navy did that, and then my philanthropy group built that central healing garden, which if you put it all together is probably about 8 acres of a wooden ravine, a very beautiful environment. This is what it is. You can see that that's a very, very natural woodland. The right side is too steep, it's a ravine, but the left side has a flat area and then a hill, and that's where we built. This opened in 2017. And you can see here that a part of the path I mentioned is on that. And then we have little side paths that take you to various experiences in the creek, as well as 2 pavilions, one of which is commemorative and the other is more social. The whole idea, this is a wild healing garden, like PTSD is a wild thing. So we thought wild nature, contacting it would be the way to heal it. And that is the theory behind it. Just bring the soldiers together with wild nature without any particular agenda. Just let them be with it and get healed directly by nature. I have partners. I always have to mention the Institute for Integrative Health in Baltimore and the TKF Foundation, our 2 biggest donors, and our research has several universities. This is an example of the woodland in the stream. And our soldiers told us the healing things that they treasure are water, stone, trees, and animals. So all we ever did is add more of those 4 things: water, stone, trees, and animals. In this case, we put the big stones in the stream. Here's some more fountain combining stone and water and some trees that we planted. And the critters are everywhere. We have possums and coons and foxes and everything. And then we have the tame deer. There's a lot of them. And they are very fearless. And, you know, if you have PTSD, to see a tame deer peacefully grazing 6 feet away without fear, that really helps you not have fear. So the animals are very important. This is our pavilion for commemoration of our lost comrades. You see that the trees are the real architecture, and the stone and the fountain is the water and the rocks that I mentioned. We also have a communal structure for informal gatherings. Same concept. The Green Road research is starting to come in. We have scientists checking the effects of this garden. And compared to an urban environment, just this year we published that the Green Road gives decreased stress and increased mindfulness and consistently makes people feel relaxed, in privacy, and safe, which is what we want for the PTSD. So we're finding that it's very, very effective for what we plan to do with this garden. So what's interesting here is that, you know, you don't have to be a doctor to do this stuff. Art and music, making art and music, and being in nature or making a garden are very healing for PTSD. So communities can make their own programs. In your own community, you can get together and teach vets how to play instrument or do art, or you can have them build a garden. Doesn't cost hardly anything, and you don't have to be a doctor to help your local veterans with PTSD. I just want to close with one more poem. It's a short one, and this one's about a soldier that lost his life. It's called The Gunner, John. Pity him here, his skull crushed by a tread. Beneath the mud pressed out one intact jaw. Some teeth at 90 degrees, the scraps of a tongue. Was he no more than this? No, this was a mask. Place it in calm beneath the ground, and when he takes it off, he'll still be whole. Everett Alvarez, one of our sponsors, is the longest serving prisoner of war from Vietnam. And may God bless America.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foote. I actually have a question for you. First of all, your presentation is just stunning and heartbreaking and also redemptive. But to say that it's devastating is actually an understatement. So I wanted to ask, how did you reconcile your job being a doctor and your duty to fight our nation's wars?
That's a really good question. And you know what? There's something of a devil's bargain involved, because your job is to heal the wounded, and that is humanitarian. But from the military's point of view, the doctors and medics are there to patch soldiers up so they can go back and be involved in war again. So you have to kind of make some tough decisions if you want to be in that role. And my thought has always just been that if I wasn't there, there'd be one man more suffering than if I was there. And I try not to think too much about, the fact that I am in uniform and contributing to the prosecution of the war. I feel like, and everyone has to decide where they stand on war. I believe that conflict is necessary for justice, okay? And that's going to have to go forward in the future. But I'm hopeful that we're going to find non-lethal ways of doing that in the next 100 years that will let me, be a military physician and military officer without the taint of murder on my fingers.
Thank you.
Thank you for my pension.
Thank you. Now, Jeanne-Marie, you mentioned that your impression growing up was that soldiers just came home and got on with it. The term PTSD did not exist until 1980. A 1986 study published in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease talked about the impact of PTSD of World War II veterans on their children. As a Navy child, how did you cope with the transgenerational effects from your father's combat trauma?
As a child, I think you sort of figure it out as you go along, or you don't. You sense something is not right. But I think a lot of dads from the 50s were the strong, silent type, and you were taught not to show your feelings, I believe, and hold it in. And I think men now may be a little different. And but backing up a bit, that term PTSD, they did say shell shocked, I think, from World War I. And that was the same thing they said for the World War II vets. But I don't think there were programs and help for them and places they could go to express it. I don't think I'm answering your question very well, but I mostly stayed out of my dad's way quite a bit. He was smoldering a lot, and I had a lot of respect for him. I was as good as I could be because I didn't want to get in trouble. I don't know if that answers your question. I saw another question down below for Dr. Foote.
It's from Wendy.
Yes, yeah.
Dr. Foote, how long do vets with PTSD generally spend in Walter Reed?
That's kind of an administrative question. They might well spend, those who have the war wounds can spend up to years in Walter Reed. And at some point, they either go back to duty if they have recovered, or they get discharged from the active military and we transfer their care over to the VA. So it's a lot of variation. Probably those with PTSD, it might be up to months. Those who have amputations can stay for years. Some of the amputees, they have to have more than 20 surgeries in order to make their prosthesis work right and to take care of the infections and other problems in their limbs. So, the short answer might be up to a month or so, and then the long answer could be for years. And we've actually sent more than 50 of our amputee soldiers, warriors, back into combat with a advanced prosthesis. So you see, they're very motivated to stay in the military and continue their careers.
Thank you, Dr. Foote. This next question is for you both. What is the most healing part of your work as poets?
Ladies first.
I think I started this book around the time my father was dying, and and worked on it for about 2 years after his death. He lived to be 98, by the way, so he's one of the last living members of the great generation. And I think just remembering him as I wrote them and keeping him alive in these poems, it was a very positive thing. Sometimes it made me sad, but just to, I think the the process of remembering him and writing about him and what he'd been through and researching it and knowing more about it. You know, they say to know is to love. And I learned more about the Battle of Okinawa, you know, I'd never even heard of it until he told me about it, which is terrible. And all he'd been through, it made me understand and love him more. And that was a healing thing.
So from my end, medicine and psychiatry are very, very interested in trauma these days. It's kind of it's a very important kind of route into therapy. And we think that mental experiential trauma is the same as physical trauma. It's anything that threatens the organism. And it has a lot of the same physical pathways, whether it's mental trauma or physical. And I think of art as the anti-trauma. It's kind of the opposite. It's a de-traumatization, because trauma, what you have is a lot of fear, and making art takes away fear. Some of our veterans say, it's like I took my fear and put it in a drawer and I can take it out and look at it when I want to instead of compulsively. Trauma is very isolating and gives people shame. Art brings people together and gives you something of value to contribute to others. And, you know, trauma is the opposite of beauty. And, you know, art of any kind is really the creation of beauty in your own space. So for me, I guess the biggest effect of art in that respect would be to be the opposite of trauma and a healing of trauma. And it does work. It's very effective. So if you have a traumatized person who's had a lot of suffering in your life or in your family, the best thing you can do for them is get them to practice one of the arts.
Thank you so much, Jeanne-Marie Osterman, Dr. Frederick Foote. It's an honor to have you both reading for us this afternoon and to offer us this gift of healing as many servicemen and women and their families struggle with invisible wounds. Do you have any parting words for our audience? Maybe Fred first.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Aileen, for putting this together. As the wars wind down, it's easy for our wounded warriors and veterans to get forgotten. So I hope and I thank you for bringing this audience together to think together about how we can continue to work to heal the wounds of conflict as we go forward.
And I too would like to thank you, Eileen, and everyone, and Dr. Foote for sharing your stories and your poetry and the information about your project. And I urge everyone to look at Dr. Foote's website, and you can donate to his cause.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that, Jeanne-Marie. Dr. Foote, what is your website?
Well, it's just the title of my book, medicagainstbomb.com. But for other questions, please just go ahead and email me direct. It's my name, so it's fred.foote, F-O-O-T-E, and it's at comcast.net.
Thank you. And Jeanne-Marie, it's ostermanpoetry.com.
Yes, ostermanpoetry.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for the light you shine, and more power to you.
Oh,
okay, I hope we meet in person soon.
Yes, me too. Friends, Jeanne-Marie Osterman's forthcoming book, Shellback, and Frederick Foote's award-winning book, Medic Against Bomb, are available from major online retailers. Please get your copy today. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, everyone, and be well.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
thank you.
Good night.